Before we even speak of manifestation, before the visualization, the affirmations, the scripting, there is something far more foundational. According to Neville Goddard, the architect of consciousness-based reality, nothing ever changes unless the inner man changes. Your world is yourself pushed out. That statement isn't poetry, it's literal. Let's get brutally honest. Most people spend their lives caught in an unconscious mental loop. They wake up each morning and unknowingly step back into the same internal narrative. The same doubts, the same fears, the same limitations. They feel stuck, but they don't realize that what they're stuck in isn't the job, the relationship, or the finances. It's the state of consciousness they keep returning to. Neville taught that states are everything. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are conscious of being. This means if your inner conversations are constantly revolving around lack, worry, or why isn't it here yet, then the outer world has no choice but to mirror those exact frequencies. You may say you want abundance. You may think you're being positive. But if beneath that there's an ongoing inner commentary that says, it's not working, I'm not there yet, what if I fail? Then that's the dominant vibration your subconscious is locking onto. Why? Because your subconscious doesn't respond to your surface level wants. It responds to your assumptions, what you deeply feel to be true. And here's the trap. Most people are repeating the wrong assumption, unknowingly, all day long. Neville Goddard used to say, change your conception of yourself, and you will automatically change the world in which you live. Yet, most never stop to ask, what conception am I living from right now? They skip from method to method, hoping the next technique will finally work, but they never break the cycle. The truth is harsh but liberating. You don't need more knowledge. You don't need more tools. You need to interrupt the pattern. This is where awareness begins. It's not enough to desire change. Desire alone can deceive. Desire can turn into longing. And longing, when sustained, becomes the declaration, I don't have it. That vibration, that message to the subconscious, is a command, a decree, and it gets fulfilled faithfully. So what now? You stop. You look within, and you recognize the problem isn't that manifestation doesn't work. It's that you've been manifesting the same identity over and over again. Neville didn't teach you to fight your old thoughts. He taught you to transcend them by entering a new state so real, so saturated with feeling, that the old state collapses under its weight. And that begins by asking a new question. Not one that seeks answers, but one that implants a new assumption. One that softly shifts you out of resistance and into the frequency of the wish fulfilled. But before we get there, you must choose. Will you keep looping the script of your old self? Or are you ready, truly ready, to step into a new state and never look back? Most people overlook the power of simplicity, especially when it comes to transformation. They expect that deep change must come from complex rituals, grand breakthroughs, or overwhelming emotion. But Neville Goddard knew otherwise. He understood something most miss, that a whisper, a question repeated gently, can rewire the subconscious more effectively than 1,000 loud affirmations shouted into a resistant mind. There's one question he taught, soft, unassuming, and yet mystically potent. Isn't it wonderful? At first glance, it feels vague, odd even. What's so powerful about that? Your rational mind might protest. But that's exactly the point. It bypasses the rational mind. It slips under the analytical defenses, because it doesn't require you to believe anything. It doesn't challenge your doubts. It doesn't create resistance. Instead, it plants a new state of consciousness, one that assumes something good has already happened, even if you don't know what it is yet. Neville often spoke about the power of assumption, not as blind hope, but as a way of being, a state so natural that the subconscious absorbs it without question. Isn't it wonderful? Is not a question seeking an answer. It's a trigger, a portal, a key that quietly opens the doorway to a new inner reality. You see, the subconscious doesn't argue with repetition. It doesn't check facts or cross-examine your feelings. It simply absorbs what is impressed upon it, especially when you're relaxed, when your conscious mind isn't guarding the gates. And few moments are as powerful as the state akin to sleep, that twilight space before drifting off, when the subconscious is wide open. Now imagine this, each night, just as your body is sinking into rest, you repeat softly, isn't it wonderful? No effort, no visualization. Just a feeling, a breath, a gentle repetition of a phrase that carries within it an entire world. Why does it work? Because the question doesn't demand clarity. It doesn't force your mind to fixate on how or when. It doesn't drag you into striving. It lulls you into acceptance, into an emotional state where something beautiful has already happened, even if you don't know what it is. And here lies the genius of Neville's insight. He knew that manifestation is not about effort. It's about alignment. You align not through pushing, but by entering a new feeling of reality and allowing the world to catch up. Isn't it wonderful? Invokes that feeling. It suggests that the breakthrough has already occurred, that something marvelous is unfolding, that you are now living in the aftermath of answered prayer, even if your outer world hasn't yet received the memo. The outer always follows the inner, never the other way around. So when you repeat this question, not with desperation, but with peace, you aren't trying to convince yourself. You're occupying a new state, a new version of you, the version who already knows something wonderful has happened. And in time, the world bends to reflect that knowing. Because, as Neville said, to be conscious of being is to be alive. When you're conscious of being blessed, the blessings must appear. When you're conscious of something wonderful, wonder shows up. It's not magic, it's law. Bring to mind that one desire, the one that lingers in your heart like a quiet ache. Maybe it's love, maybe it's money, maybe it's clarity in a situation that feels endlessly uncertain. Whatever it is, ask yourself this: why hasn't it come yet? You may believe it's because you haven't done enough, or that you're not ready. Or maybe, if you're honest, part of you doubts it will ever happen at all. But what if the delay has nothing to do with effort or timing? What if the only thing preventing its arrival is the state you're living from? Neville Goddard taught that every state has its own conditions. When you're in the state of lack, the world must reflect lack. When you're in the state of fear, fear multiplies. But when you enter the state of the wish fulfilled, everything begins to shift. Not because you're forcing it, but because you've changed the vibration you're broadcasting. This is why desire alone isn't enough. Because most people live with conflicting thoughts. On the surface, they want something deeply. But under the surface, in the subconscious, there's another voice. A voice saying, what if it doesn't work? What if I'm not good enough? What if this is all just false hope? And Neville was clear. The subconscious accepts the dominant feeling, not the occasional hope, not the moment of excitement, but the ongoing, most frequently repeated emotion. Which means that even if you spend 5 minutes a day visualizing your dream life, but the other 23 hours and 55 minutes worrying, doubting, or fearing, the result is already decided. That's why the phrase, "Isn't it wonderful?" is so powerful. Because it doesn't try to erase the doubt. It doesn't battle the fear. It simply introduces a new assumption, so subtle, so gentle, that the old state begins to dissolve without a fight. When you say those words, "Isn't it wonderful?" and you pair them with a feeling of quiet relief, as if something good has already happened, your subconscious begins to accept that as reality. You're no longer trying to manifest. You're living as if it already is. This is the heart of Neville's teachings. You must feel from the end. Not wish for it, not hope it arrives, but embody the state of already having received it. And isn't it wonderful? Is a direct entry into that end state, a back door into the feeling of it is done. Close your eyes and imagine. The desire has manifested. The problem is resolved. The money came. The love arrived. The opportunity unfolded in ways you couldn't even plan. Now breathe into that feeling. Don't try to make it perfect. Just feel the subtle relief. The smile that comes when something long-awaited finally clicks into place. That quiet ah. Yes. And now, from that place, whisper, "Isn't it wonderful?" And again, "Isn't it wonderful?" That's not a technique anymore. That's a new state of being. That's you stepping into the version of yourself where the desire has already become fact. You are no longer begging for change. You are dwelling in the change. And according to Neville, once you dwell in that state, persist in that assumption, the world has no choice but to mirror it back. Not maybe, not hopefully, but lawfully, inevitable. Now that you've tasted the state, even briefly, of the wish fulfilled, the question becomes, how do I stay there? How do you make that feeling your new home, rather than a fleeting visitor in the mind? Neville Goddard gave a precise and beautiful answer: through repetition. Not repetition from struggle, not through rigid rituals, but a soft, effortless, natural repetition, spoken in the language of the subconscious feeling. You see, the subconscious doesn't care how eloquent your words are. It responds to one thing: what you feel to be true. So Neville taught a nightly practice that is almost deceptively simple. Just before drifting to sleep, repeat this phrase in a quiet, rhythmic way. "Isn't it wonderful?" And then complete the sentence with your fulfilled desire. Not as a question, not as a hope, but as a statement of gratitude, as if it has already happened. For example, isn't it wonderful that I am now financially free? Isn't it wonderful that love flows to me effortlessly? Isn't it wonderful that everything worked out perfectly for me? This is more than positive thinking. It's not wishful dreaming. It is what Neville called assumption sustained until it hardens into fact. He often spoke of the state akin to sleep, that drowsy, in-between place right before consciousness dissolves into dreams. In that moment, the walls of the conscious mind weaken. The guard of reason steps aside, and what you feed your awareness then, in that quiet, still moment, is accepted directly by the subconscious. That's the moment you plant the seed, not with force, but with faith clothed in feeling. The beauty of this practice is that it doesn't require proof. You don't need to see evidence in the outside world before you assume it's done. In fact, if you're waiting for evidence, you're delaying the manifestation. The evidence comes after the assumption, never before. So instead of asking how will it happen, ask how would I feel if it had already happened. That's the difference between hoping and embodying. Neville was adamant. The outer world is not the cause. It is the result. The cause, always and only, is your inner state. And this repetition, this nightly whisper of isn't it wonderful, gently moves you into a new state, a new version of yourself. The version who has received. The version who knows it's already done. The version who doesn't seek signs, but lives as the sign itself. Do it gently, lovingly, just as you're drifting off. Not like a command, not like a task, but like a song, a lullaby for your spirit. Isn't it wonderful that it's all falling into place? Say it until you fall asleep. And watch, quietly, as your world begins to rearrange itself, not through effort, but through law. The law of assumption. The law of consciousness. The law that Neville devoted his entire life to unveiling. Because once the seed is planted in the subconscious, the harvest is no longer a matter of if, only when. There comes a moment in every transformation where something quietly shifts. You don't always see it in the mirror. You don't always hear it in your thoughts. But you feel it, subtly, powerfully, as if the weight of striving has lifted and been replaced by something softer, more certain. That is the moment you've stepped into the new state. That is the moment reality begins to conform. Neville Goddard called this living in the end. It means you no longer chase your desire, you live from it. You don't check for signs every day. You don't question the timing. You simply become the person for whom the thing is already true. And from that place, reality bends to your assumption. This is not blind faith. This is not delusion. It is the spiritual technology of the inner world, and it works with or without your permission. The question is, are you using it consciously? You've practiced the feeling. You've repeated the phrase. You've imagined what it feels like to already have the thing you once longed for. And now, you walk forward from that place. Not hoping, not waiting, but knowing. There will be days when doubt knocks again. When the outer world tempts you to react from the old self. That's normal. That's expected. But it's in those moments you return to the state, not through effort, but through remembrance. You remind yourself, isn't it wonderful? Not because you see it yet, but because you know that it's already yours in the unseen. The invisible always precedes the visible. The inner precedes the outer. The assumption precedes the fact. Neville taught, do not ask yourself how it will happen. Do not speculate. Simply assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And once you persist in that state, the bridge of incidents will unfold. Seemingly unrelated events will start aligning. Conversations, opportunities, signs, dreams, all conspiring to bring into form what you have already accepted as true within. That's when you realize something sacred. Manifestation was never about getting something. It was always about becoming someone, the version of you who lives in fullness, not lack, in faith, not fear, in certainty, not struggle. So tonight, when the world quiets, and you lie in bed with the weight of the day fading, whisper softly, isn't it wonderful that everything is working out perfectly for me? Isn't it wonderful that what I once hoped for is already done? And let sleep carry that feeling deep into your subconscious, where it will be watered and nurtured into reality. Because what you accept emotionally, not just intellectually, becomes law in your world. So now, the final question is not, will it happen? The real question is, will you live as if it already has? That's where the shift occurs. That's where reality surrenders. Tonight, let this be more than knowledge. Let it be practice. Before you fall asleep, repeat the phrase 100 times, not with effort, but with peace. Say it. Feel it. Live from it. And when the shift happens, when you wake up and something within feels different, Come back to this and declare in the comments. It's happening. Because once you claim it, reality has no choice but to follow.